In 1546, screams echoed through the Tower of London as Anisku became the only woman in English history tortured within its walls. But that's not even the worst part. What you're about to discover will horrify you. By the end of this video, you'll understand why historians tried to bury this story for centuries and why Anisku's execution remains the most brutal female death in English history. Here's what I'm going to reveal to you today. First, how a 25-year-old mother's simple act of reading the Bible led to the most savage torture session ever recorded in Tudor, England. Second, the royal conspiracy so dangerous that it forced King Henry VII's own officials to break sacred English law. And third, the gruesome torture method so extreme that it horrified even seasoned TUDA executioners who had seen everything. If you're ready to uncover one of history's most deliberately hidden atrocities, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened to Anku will change how you see religious persecution forever. And trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking revelation I'm saving for the end. But first, you need to understand exactly how England became a killing ground for anyone who dared to think differently. Picture England in 1546. King Henry VIII is dying, paranoid, and absolutely obsessed with hunting down Protestant heretics. The king who broke from Rome to marry Anne Boleyn has now become more Catholic than the Pope himself. Anyone caught questioning Catholic doctrine faces a simple choice: recant or burn alive. No exceptions, no mercy. Enter Anisku, 25 years old, mother of two, born into wealth and privilege as a Lincoln gentlewoman. By every measure of Tudor society, she should have been safe. But Anne made one fatal mistake. She learned to read, and worse, she read the Bible in English instead of Latin. Suddenly, this educated woman started asking questions that terrified the religious establishment. Here's what nobody tells you about Tudor. England. Questioning Catholic doctrine wasn't just heresy. It was treason against the crown itself, and treason meant the most brutal death the state could devise. Why does Anisku's story matter today? Because her case exposed the savage lengths that powerful institutions will go to silence dissent. Her torture wasn't random cruelty. It was calculated terrorism designed to break not just her body, but the spirit of every Protestant in England. What you're about to discover is a story of 3 escalating horrors, each one more shocking than the last, each one designed to destroy a woman whose only crime was thinking for herself. First, the forbidden questions that sealed her fate. Second, the illegal torture that broke English law itself. And third, the royal conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Henry's court. But here's what even most historians don't know. Anku documented everything. She smuggled written accounts from her prison cell, creating the only first-person testimony of torture in the Tower of London. And those accounts reveal something unthinkable. March 1546, Anku walks into a London church and commits the act that will destroy her life. She publicly challenges the doctrine of transubstantiation. For those who don't know, transubstantiation is the Catholic belief that bread and wine literally become the body and blood of Christ during communion. Not symbolically, literally. Anku looked at this doctrine and said 3 words that would condemn her to death. I don't believe. But here's what nobody tells you about Anne's questions. She wasn't just some random woman spouting heresy. She was a brilliant theologian who could quote scripture better than most priests. When church officials tried to debate her, she destroyed their arguments using their own Bible. Imagine the scene. This young mother standing in front of powerful men, calmly explaining why their core religious beliefs were wrong, using logic, using evidence, using the very book they claimed to represent. The church officials were humiliated. Worse, they were terrified because if word spread that a woman could demolish Catholic doctrine using scripture alone, how many others might start asking the same questions? Here is Anne's own words. Smuggled from her prison cell. I was asked if a mouse eating the host received God. I said, yes, if the mouse believed. Do you understand what she just did? She turned their own logic against them, exposing how ridiculous the doctrine sounded when taken to its natural conclusion. This wasn't just heresy. This was intellectual warfare. The authorities arrested her immediately. But instead of a quick trial and execution, something unprecedented happened. They decided to make an example of her that would terrify every Protestant in England. The problem was, Anescu was a gentlewoman, and English law specifically protected gentlewomen from torture. No exceptions. It had been this way for centuries. But here's what the history. Books don't tell you. Henry VII government was so desperate to break Anescu that they were willing to break the law itself. Don't click away yet, because what happened next in the Tower of London was so illegal, so unprecedented that even the professional torturers refused to participate. But questioning doctrine was just the beginning. What she did next would seal her fate in the most horrific way possible. June 1546, the Tower of London. Anescu is dragged down stone steps into the torture chamber, becoming the first gentlewoman in English history to face the rack. Here's what you need to understand about Tudor law. Gentlewomen were legally protected from torture, period. This wasn't just tradition, it was sacred law that had protected noble women for over 300 years. But Henry VI counselors were facing a terrifying problem. Anescu knew the names of Protestant sympathizers in Henry's own court, possibly even Queen Catherine Parr herself. The rack was England's most feared torture device. Victims were stretched until their joints dislocated, their limbs tore from their sockets, and their spines snapped. Most people confess just from seeing it. But here's what nobody tells you about Anne's torture session. She didn't just refuse to confess. She preached to her torturers, listened to her own words. Then they put me on the rack because I confessed no ladies or gentlewomen to be of my opinion. And thereon they kept me a long time. And because I lay still and did not cry out, my Lord Chancellor and Master Rich took pains to rack me with their own hands. Did you catch that? The Lord Chancellor of England personally operated the torture device because Anne wouldn't scream. Thomas Wriothesley was the second most powerful man in England. Imagine the Attorney General today personally torturing a prisoner because professional interrogators couldn't break them. That's exactly what happened. But here's the most shocking part. The Tower's professional torturers, men who had broken countless prisoners, refused to continue. They told the Lord Chancellor that what he was doing was illegal and walked away. So Wriothesley and his assistant, Richard Rich, operated the rack themselves. Two of the most powerful men in England, cranking the mechanism that was tearing apart a 25-year-old mother. Anne's bones cracked, her joints dislocated, her screams finally echoed through the tower. But she still refused to name Protestant sympathizers in Henry's court. The torture was so extreme that even these hardened government officials realized they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The torture was so brutal that hardened executioners refused to continue. But someone else stepped forward to finish what they started. What happened next exposes the most dangerous conspiracy in Tudor England, one that reached all the way to Henry VII himself. Here's what the official records tried to hide. When word of Anne's illegal torture reached Henry's court, instead of punishment, there was panic because Anescu knew secrets that could topple the kingdom. Court records discovered centuries later revealed the truth. Anne had been secretly meeting with Protestant sympathizers in Queen Catherine Parr in a circle. The king's own wife was potentially involved in heretical activities. But here's what nobody tells you about the cover-up. Henry VIII personally approved the continuation of Anne's torture, making him complicit in breaking his own laws. Think about this. The king who created the Church of England to gain religious freedom was now torturing women for exercising that same freedom. The hypocrisy was staggering. The conspiracy reached even deeper. Lord Chancellor Wriothesley didn't just torture Anne on his own initiative. He was following direct orders to extract a confession that would implicate Queen Catherine Parr in heresy. If Anne had broken, if she had named the Queen as a Protestant sympathizer, Catherine Parr would have followed Anne Boleyn to the executioner's block. Henry VIII would have had his sixth wife executed for the exact same religious beliefs that led him to break from Rome in the first place. Anescu understood the stakes. Her torture wasn't just about her own life, it was about protecting the Queen of England and preserving the Protestant Reformation itself. So, she endured torture so severe that her body was permanently destroyed. Her bones were shattered, her joints were dislocated, she couldn't walk, couldn't stand, couldn't even hold herself upright. I know this is getting dark, but if you're still watching, you're clearly as fascinated by history's brutal truths as I am. Make sure you're subscribed because next week I'm revealing the secret executions that Henry VII government tried to erase from history entirely. But Anne's story isn't over because what happened at her execution was so shocking that it changed English law forever. Her body was so destroyed she couldn't walk to her execution, but the worst was yet to come. July 16th, 1546. Smithfield Market, London. Ankou arrives at her. Execution carried in a chair because her tortured body can no longer support her weight. Picture this scene. A 25-year-old woman, bones shattered, joints dislocated, being lifted from a chair and chained upright to a wooden stake. Her broken body cannot stand on its own, so the chains hold her vertical as kindling is piled around her feet. But here's what horrified even the bloodthirsty Tudor crowd. Anisku was still preaching as the executioners chained her broken body to the post. She was quoting scripture, encouraging other Protestant prisoners being burned alongside her and condemning the religious hypocrisy of Henry's court. Listen to her final recorded words. "I came not hither to deny my Lord and Master." Even facing the flames, even with her body destroyed by torture, she refused to recant her beliefs. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They had come expecting to see a broken heretic beg for mercy. Instead, they witnessed a woman so unbroken by torture that she turned her own execution into a sermon. But here's the most shocking part. As the flames rose around her, Anisku did something that changed English history forever. She forgave her torturers. Her public forgiveness exposed the savage brutality of Henry's government in a way that no protest could have achieved. Here was a woman tortured illegally, burned alive for reading the Bible, and she responded with grace that made her executioners look like monsters. The impact was immediate and devastating for Henry's reputation. Pamphlets describing her courage spread across Europe. Protestant martyrology was born. Ankou became the symbol of religious persecution that inspired centuries of resistance. Within months, Henry VII was dead. Many believed God had struck him down for the illegal torture of Ankou. The precedent, she set that governmental torture of gentle women was unacceptable, became enshrined in English law. Her courage didn't just inspire Protestants, it fundamentally changed how England viewed the relationship between religious conscience and state power. The brutality used against her was so extreme that it discredited torture as a tool of religious persecution. Anisku's final words became a rallying cry that outlasted Henry VII himself. "I came not hither to deny my Lord and Master." Those words, spoken by a woman whose body had been broken, but whose spirit remained unbreakable, echoed through English history for centuries. They inspired the Pilgrims who fled to America, the religious freedom clauses in colonial charters, and ultimately the First Amendment to the American Constitution. Her story proves that sometimes the most powerful weapon against tyranny isn't violence, it's an unbreakable conscience. Ankou's torture changed English legal precedent forever. Never again would a gentle woman be subjected to the rack. Her case became the foundation for legal protections that still exist today. But here's why her story matters right now in 2024. Around the world, people are still being persecuted, tortured, and killed for their religious beliefs. Ankou's courage, her willingness to endure unthinkable suffering rather than betray her conscience, remains as relevant today as it was 478 years ago. Think about this. What would you have done in her position? Would you have had the strength to protect others by enduring torture? Would you have chosen principle over survival? Anisku proved that true power isn't the ability to inflict pain, it's the strength to endure it without losing your humanity. Was Ankou England's bravest religious martyr? Or was her defiance worth the ultimate price? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to discover more stories of courage that changed history, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Next week, I'm revealing the secret executions that shaped the modern world.